The world online is constantly up in the air. Everything is chaos. It's mostly arguments and a complete lack of human connection. And to be honest, we could all use a little grounding from time to time. So join me on this little adventure on the ground, hopefully hearing some grounded perspectives and, of course, lots of ground coffee along the way. I'm Christine Grace, and this is Grounded. So I thought it would be a good way to start this channel by taking you guys along with me to CPAC Great Britain. Now, if you don't know what CPAC is, then I'm going to imagine you've been living under a rock. But for those of you that don't know, it is essentially the Conservative Political Action Conference. It was started in the States, it was founded by Ronald Reagan, and we've never had it over here in the UK before, and this is the first time that it's ever been here. Now, obviously, if you follow my main channel, you know that my views are typically more right-leaning. Obviously, I'm not going to agree with everyone here on everything, nor are they going to agree with me on everything here, but nonetheless, it's good to be in a room full of like-minded people. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I want to meet people with grounded perspectives. I want to meet people who are enthusiastic about what they believe in, and I want to hear other opinions. I don't just want to be in my room talking to a camera. It's important to talk to people, it's important to see what other people think, and in a world where everyone is constantly chronically online, it's just important to get out and talk to people. And this event is the perfect place for it. So yeah, stay tuned. We're going to speak to some really interesting people, and I'm really excited to share it all with you. So I'm here today at CPAC Great Britain. It is the first ever CPAC to appear here in the United Kingdom, and today I am joined by, would you like to introduce yourself?
Alan Mendoza, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society.
And for the viewers who won't know what the Henry Jackson Society is, can you enlighten us all?
Well, I hope they'll all know, but it is a British think tank that looks to promote liberty, democracy, freedom around the world, but that of course means that internationally it's about the free world versus the unfree world, so Russia, China, Iran issues, North Korea, and domestically it's about the threats to freedom here. That could be free speech, it could be extremism, it could be disinformation, all the things that we know have been affecting our societies here. So it's a double-pronged approach.
That's really interesting. I think one thing that my viewers are going to find particularly fascinating is the fact that in America, freedom of speech is obviously written into their constitution. Over here, the assumption is that we have it, but the truth tells a different story. What would you like to say to the American viewers about just how bad things are here in the UK when it comes to free speech?
Well, it's a good question to ask, because we've seen crazy situations, of course, where people have been literally arrested for things they have written on social media. Not even, sort of out there in real life, as it were, just things they've written on social media. They've been arrested, been put in jail for that. And I think Americans will find that quite shocking.
Yeah.
That said, there has been, I think the high tide of that is over, and there's been a big backlash. I think people are fed up of having their thoughts policed, as it were, in that kind of way. And obviously there's a big difference. Nobody wants to see people shout, fire in a crowded theatre and get away with that. And there are certain national security threats which we think are obviously worthy of being dealt with. But on the whole, if people say, unfortunate things, there's no right not to be offended.
Yeah.
That's the reality of our society, and it should be axiomatically understood. It used to be axiomatically understood that you could do that, and that you wouldn't be punished for it. That's changed.
Yeah, and I think one important thing to really speak about, and I imagine a lot of people are going to be doing that here today, is what's the practical approach to this? What reform needs to happen? Is it, social standards? We need to have more conversations with people about this? Or is there actually changes that can be made to the legal system and to the laws that can ensure that this freedom isn't taken away from us as it has been the last couple of years?
Well, I think it has to be a whole-of-society approach. So yes, of course there's a legislative purpose here to say that we're enshrining this in some legislation to make it quite clear what is and isn't allowed to be said and not in that sort of way. So that's easy to do. But actually it's more about the education side. One of the reasons I think we have got into this problem is that over time we've had, if you like, the woke infiltration of our education system. And as a result, it's meant that we've seen, people being cancelled, being shut out, being told that they're racist, or all sorts of insults hurled at them just for saying
racist, misogynistic, homophobic. The list goes on.
I'm sure you've had it.
Yeah.
People are saying, "Oh, you are a misogynist," or whatever, in that kind of way. But it's ridiculous because all you're doing is expressing a point of view that is a pretty normative point of view, but doesn't fit into the woke mindset. And they hurl abuse at it because they don't want to actually debate it.
Yes.
They don't like debate. They want instead to discuss, to shout you down and claim it. Great example. I was at a debate at the Cambridge Union a few weeks ago about whether Britain needs a radical left alternative. Now, you could say we've got it already, but I said no, of course. And we explained why the radical left was a disaster for individual freedom, for society and beyond. The other side had no debating argument at all. They just said, you are Nazis and this is about Gaza. And it's like, what? Here's the calibre of debate that we're dealing with now. So that's a problem in our educational system, right?
It is. Yeah, it absolutely is.
As to how things work.
And I think ultimately it comes down to the institutions. I speak about this a lot on my other channel, the fact that these institutions have been infiltrated by, as Elon Musk puts it, the woke mind virus. And unfortunately, children are now being indoctrinated from such a young age to have these extreme leftist views, to think that to challenge someone's opinion automatically makes you a Nazi. And I don't think that people can actually fully comprehend just how dangerous that is for people who do sit more on the right side of politics. Because if people are seeing us as, Nazis, then of course they're going to feel completely justified in abuse towards people who have our views. I mean, look at what happened to Charlie Kirk. I think that's something that Americans are able to resonate with, is that when you teach people that violence can come from words, people will respond with violence. So I think that it's something that does need to happen. I think definitely reform within the legal institution needs to happen, but I think the societal approach is what's really going to make the difference. How do you propose that we do that?
Well, that has to be a twofold approach. Firstly, of course, you can mandate it if you win control of the government through the educational system. And government, a government of the right needs to be much better at sort of dictating this sort of thing. And again, the whole point is we're not dictating a right-wing point of view.
No.
That's a key thing. It's dictating an ability to debate and discuss ideas freely, because that's what we think is real. Of course, we think our views are correct, but it's not about saying they are correct and therefore you have to submit to them. You can be wrong. That's fine. We'll just debate about it rather than shutting you down.
Yes.
But the other key thing is we have to remember the left is very good at winning control of institutions. And so they, for years, have stuffed quangos, cultural institutions, media institutions with their people. And frankly, the right's going to have to do some of that to redress the balance when it gets the opportunity. And what normally happens is there's a theory, if you like, of what's called the socialist ratchet. This is a theory from the 1970s that's still true today in the institution. The ratchet works like this. When the left come in, they move everything left. They ratchet it leftwards. Okay? And when the right come in, they just hold it steady. When the left come in again, they ratchet it. The effect is, in the end, you're over there.
You make a pivot left, more and more left.
And you never go back to the right.
Yeah.
The right has to push back to the right. Unfortunately, it can do so in a way without being abusive to the left.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between the parties. The left has got nothing left but abuse because it can't win the debate.
No, I absolutely agree with you. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
Draining the swamp, getting rid of the bureaucracy, taking back democratic control is the right thing to do. The best form of government is one of the people, by the people and for the people. We know how to do it. But the fault lies with us, not in our stars. Never forget that. It is we who have to change it. It is our efforts that will make it happen. It is down to Conservatives. Let us not hide behind bogeymen. Get on with the work that needs to be done. Thank you.
One thing that's really interesting about what Alan just said is the fact that unfortunately when leftist governments get into power, the institutions are very easily taken over and swayed towards the left. One thing he didn't say that of course popped to my mind, if you've watched my main channel you'll know exactly why I'm thinking this, is the fact that what happens when leftist governments get into power? They employ loads of women. Which way do women tend to vote? They tend to vote left. Why is that? Well, that's an important question. That's why I'm about to speak to my friend here, my lovely lady friend. That sounds really weird, lady friend. I didn't mean it like that. But this is Annie. She is a councillor here in the UK. Annie, for the people who don't know what that means, can you explain to us what your job is?
Yes, so I'm a county, district and town councillor, which is essentially a local representative that speaks up for people who's democratically elected.
Amazing. And why do you think it is that this is a trend that I've noticed. You can see it in the data. When leftist governments get into power, they employ more women. And typically, when women are in institutions, things tend to sway more left. You're a woman who's in politics, and your views are certainly nowhere close to the left. So why is it that women are swaying so far towards the left, and what can be done to bring them further back to the right, or at least to the centre?
Well, I think it's like biology, that women are more empathetic in everything they do, and they've got that kindness insensitive, where men, not to be generic or anything like that, are more leaders and like to take control, and that's why we've got the divide. But I think when it happens to these women who, you know, are on the left, when things occur to them, for instance, like if anything occurs with their taxes going up, or God forbid, an incident with an illegal immigrant, you know, that they are consistently guarding and saying that these people are peaceful asylum seekers. When something occurs to them, I think that's when they will change, and that's when things will happen. And that's why we've seen kind of a rise in women now with reform, because we've seen the effect of illegal immigration in our country. I mean, only yesterday, 3 men were put away for 78 years for raping, 3 illegal men at that, were raping a young girl in Brighton, 2 Egyptian, 1 Iranian. You know, when is it going to stop? When are people going to wake up? And I think for me, it was 1 child was enough.
Yeah.
One woman was enough. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is the left has indoctrinated these women and these young children for so long that until they can see it with their eyes, then they're not going to change. And I hope that I can act as a voice for young women who are scared to speak up about their beliefs on the right.
I think one thing that is frustrating with this situation is that, unfortunately, for some of these women, they can see case after case after case, but they will still make the argument that, well, white men commit more of these crimes.
Yeah.
White British men commit more of these crimes.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Of course they do. The demographic, of this country is majority white British. So of course the statistics are going to be much higher. If you go to Nigeria, the demographic of black men raping is going to be much higher than white men. It's just common sense. You know, of course we have horrific offenders in the country, but they deserve to go in our prisons and rot in hell. People who come here illegally deserve to be deported if they commit an offence. I don't believe that the victims should have to live with their offenders and being paid into the prisons that we have, because let's be honest, in Iran, if these men was to commit them crimes, they would be put in much worse circumstances than they would be put here. And so, you know, seeing the effect that they've got here is much easier. Of course that they're going to commit these crimes in Britain, and they're not going to care because they won't be deported back home. But we need a stronger stance on that, because it will stop people coming over and committing these horrific offences.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail absolutely on the head there. I think common sense is unfortunately not very common anymore. My final question to you is, you know, how much of the young British public do you think is actually starting to have more common sense? Do you think we're still heading more left before we swing back right, or do you think the momentum has already started bringing us back to more of a centre-right?
As much as social media is deemed to be a bad thing for the indoctrination of left-wing policies, it's also a great thing for the right. And Nigel Farage and his movement is huge on social media. I think he's the most followed politician, and I think it's really interesting to know that these young people are following Nigel's journey, and it's become popular now to be right-wing, whereas before, you know, if we're going back to COVID era, it was popular to be more left-wing with Black Lives Matter, you know, the idea of vaccinations and whatnot. So yeah, I think the younger generations are waking up because they're seeing their parents having to pay more council tax. Like I said, they're living next to asylum seeker hotels, and you know, I think that the only way we can really bring them into it is saying, you know, at university you're paying 65 grand out for a degree, and you're not getting any jobs because you're white British and DEI won't accept you for that. I spoke about it on the panel at CPAC here. Actually, you know, meritocracy is abolished in Britain, and it's taken people to go through university, go through the system to understand that they're not going to get a job being white British anymore. You're too boring for the system, unfortunately. Yeah. So I think as soon as we change the wheel and tackle the establishment, the far left establishment of that's when we'll start seeing young people become more linked to the right.
It's really promising. I think my viewers are going to be really intrigued to see someone who is in politics currently, and a woman, and more right-leaning, because I think a lot of what they see over in the States, and a lot of my viewers obviously in the States, is unfortunately just left nonsense, the government throwing people in prison for saying things online, so it's really refreshing to see. So thanks for being on the channel.
Thank you guys.
We are failing them through the deliberate choices of a political and educational establishment that has decided that some children's disadvantage matters more than others. And that's a hard thing to say. I'll be called divisive by people who have never set foot in Rochdale, Jaywick, or the estates of Newcastle and Doncaster. But I did not enter public life to say comforting things. I entered it to say true things. And this is a truth that we have avoided for far too long. There are 1.2 million white British children from disadvantaged backgrounds in our schools today. And they are, on every measure, the worst performing group in the English educational system. Only 36% of white British pupils on free school meals achieve a grade 4 or above in English or Maths GCSE, against 72% of their better off classmates or Black and Asian kids. Barely 1 in 7 reaches a good grade 5. Only half of these children reach a good level of development by the end of reception. Even before they've had a fair chance to begin, they're behind. And the gap does not close as they grow older. It widens. It widens at primary school. It widens again at secondary school. By the time they sit their GCSEs, only half as many white working class children achieve that crucial grade 4 as their better off peers. Young, white British male pupils on free school meals are the least likely to go to university. They're more likely to be in need, not in education, employment or training. We've got 1 million of those now, between 18 to 24 years old. They're more likely to end up in prison or have a mental health problem. And suicide is the biggest killer of men under 50. Now, these children are also absent from school nearly twice as much as the national average, and are 2.5 times more likely to be severely absent. Only 50% of them believe that they're likely to go to university, against 80% of children from other classes and other ethnicities. They've looked at the system and concluded, rightly, that it wasn't built with them in mind. And they're right. An independent inquiry into white working class children found that our education system is simply not set up to serve the needs of white working class children or families. And we're not underserving them by oversight or accident. We're just not serving them at all. Why has this happened? Well, the story of these children cannot be divorced from the story of the places that they come from. The coalfields, the mill towns, the coastal resorts that once thrived but now stand empty. In 1970, manufacturing, construction and agriculture were nearly half of our national output. Today, they're a fraction of that. Those jobs gave dignity, purpose, wages to a generation of working men, and then they simply vanished. And nothing of equal worth was built in their place. Their parents, many of them who had bad experience of school themselves, failed to trust the education, and so didn't encourage learning at home. But not because they didn't care, but because the system never gave them a reason to believe that it cared for them. Only 48% of white working class parents, so they say they communicate regularly with their children's schools, compared with 60% of white middle class parents and 68% of non-white working class parents. So even there, in the most basic relationship between home and school, this community is falling through the gap. This is not a story of low aspiration. This is not a story of laziness, as some would believe. This is not a story that some might sneer at from their North London chambers. It is a story of geography, of economic abandonment, and of institutions that have quietly stopped believing that these children are worth the effort. Now, upstream of this crisis lies the political culture and the laws that were supposed to instill equality, but instead have engendered division, unfairness, and exclusion. The Equality Act was passed with good intentions in 2010, in the dying days of the last Labour administration. Its aim was to end discrimination and to open doors that had far too long been shut to minority groups and women. But intentions are not outcomes. And across our public institutions, the duties imposed by this legislation led to the establishment of the diversity, equality and inclusion industry. The Act introduced the concept of protected characteristics, where you're defined more by the colour of your skin, your gender or your age, rather than the content of your character. It introduced duties, legally binding duties of positive action, and the public sector equality duty, enshrined in law, in black and white. And over the last 20 years, these duties have time and time again tipped over into plain discrimination.
So I'm here with Connie Shaw, and if you don't know who she is, I'm about to let her introduce herself. Connie, who are you? Where are we? And what are we doing here?
So I am the External Affairs Officer at the Free Speech Union, and we are at CPAC, which is essentially, I suppose it was originally an American thing, and now it's come to Britain, and it's all about saving the West, saving Britain, and there are a lot of, sort of conservative speakers, and the FSU is here, stalling the exhibition hall, promoting free speech, which is obviously a fundamental value in the West. So I'm very happy to be here and also see so many young people here. Which is really great.
It's really good to see young people here. I think one thing that people get in their heads is this idea that politics is just for the older generation, politics is outdated, no one cares about this stuff anymore, and it's not true at all. We've just had a wonderful speech by 3 youngsters. You had Annie, Based and Bougie on there, Jaden Palmer, who are all really involved in politics, much like yourself, which is really great to see. My thing on my channel is a lot of my audience are in the States, and there's a lot of talk about Britain in the States and what they think life is like in the UK, but it tends to be very different. And I think that's really sad because America, a lot of their values come from Britain and Christian ethics, and it feels like we've almost been forgotten about. What's one thing that you wish the Americans knew about life in Britain and what really needs to change here?
I would say the single biggest threat, and I'm sure they won't be surprised to hear, to Britain and Europe more generally is immigration, particularly from the Muslim world. And if we do not I'm quite pessimistic about this. I think that we are potentially already too late to deal with this issue properly. I would very much recommend reading my colleague's book, Dr. Ben Jones, who's the Director of Case Management at the Free Speech Union. His book that's just been released called The Island of Strangers, which is a phrase that Keir Starmer once used in a speech about immigration or about social cohesion. And then very soon after, he apologised and retracted using that phrase, Island of Strangers. And Ben jokes that was the one thing he got right, that people could resonate with. And Ben's book explains how mass immigration has fragmented our society so much that it means that we cannot have freedom of speech if we are living in a hyper-diverse society. Yeah. Because there are some now groups in our population who live in Britain who have fundamentally different ideas about what freedom of speech means, and that means that the British public or the British people are not able to express their views in the way that they once would be able to. It's why we're seeing people being arrested for insulting Islam or insulting Muhammad. It's why we see the police appeasing Muslim populations when, for example, the Maccabi Tel Aviv football team came to play Aston Villa. It's all this two-tier, this feeling that the British public have that different groups are being treated differently, and that's where this phrase two-tier comes from. So I'd very much recommend reading Dr. Ben Jones's book, The Island of Strangers, which is such an easy read, and he explains it so well to get just a picture of why it is that Britain is in this state. And freedom of speech obviously is something that the Americans took from Britain as a British value that they took with them, and now we are being lectured, rightly so, our leaders are being lectured by American leaders to remind us how important that is. I would recommend reading that, and yeah, it is immigration that is our biggest issue here, and I don't think anyone will be surprised to hear that.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's not the first time that Keir Starmer has been caught saying one thing and then retracting it and saying another. I think one thing that the Americans really need to understand is I think it's really hard for them to truly conceptualize just how much we don't have freedom of speech here in the UK. In America, sure, you say something really drastic, you're inciting violence, of course legal action, something like that is going to be taken against you. But over here, guys, it is really as simple as the fact if you say something online that can be interpreted in a certain way, even if it's not explicitly advocating for violence towards any certain group, you will be put in prison in this country. We have, 4 figures worth of people who've been arrested or put in prison for things that they've said online. People's jobs are ruined, people's lives, their reputations are completely ruined over having different views. Now, I'm very much the believer in, everyone is allowed to have their own opinions, and I think it's really important that we have different opinions, because how else are we going to learn if we're just stuck in an echo chamber all the time? You need to be able to understand where people are coming from. My problem is when you're then persecuted for having something that doesn't fit the current status quo. So how do you think we combat that? I know you said you're quite pessimistic, but in an ideal world, what would be the next step forward to really regaining freedom of speech in this country?
Well, we need a government who is prepared to actually deal with the issues that the British public are worried about, and especially under this Labour government so far, they are much more concerned about people pointing out what the problems are rather than the problems themselves. That's why, for example, Lucy Connolly, who I'm going to be interviewing later on today for the Free Speech Union podcast, she got a harsher sentence for that tweet, which she deleted, than someone who actually took part in the violence that she was accused of trying to stir up.
And for the American viewers, can you explain that case briefly for us?
So Lucy Connolly is a childminder who, in the immediate aftermath of the horrific Southport stabbings and murders, she posted on Twitter saying, how awful it was, and she said, burn the hotels down, for all I care. If that makes me racist, so be it. Those 3 words, for all I care, or 4 words, sorry, for all I care, were extremely important, because I think it's very tough to argue that she was actually trying to. It was an indifference. It was a horrible tweet, and she admits that as well. She deleted it after within 4 hours, apologised for it. She was arrested, remanded in custody. She was not granted bail. And just for context, not granted bail for a tweet, but the chap who murdered 2 Jews at Heaton Park Synagogue last year, he was on bail for 2 charges of rape. He was on bail, and during that time he managed to go and stab 2 Jews. So we have people who are on bail for rape in this country who go on to murder people, but Lucy Connolly was not granted bail. And she was sentenced to 31 months, 2.5 years in prison. When the sentence was handed down, the judge made references to the values of diversity and inclusion, which Lucy had failed to uphold as part of her tweet. And she's now become a huge advocate for freedom of speech. The FSU supported her, and we appealed her sentence, although we were unsuccessful at the Court of Appeal. The judge upheld her 31-month sentence. But Lucy's case, she wasn't the only one who was in prison, but her case was the particularly most prominent.
It certainly gained a lot of traction.
And, Nigel Farage testified in Congress about her case. You also, Americans may well have seen Graham Linehan, the Irish comedian who we've supported at the Free Speech Union, testify in Congress when he was arrested at Heathrow. And all of the things that you were saying just now about, saying these things can land you in prison. I work for the Free Speech Union, as I've said, and I would highly recommend anyone, we're a membership organisation, so we have 45,000 members, and it's almost like, we're not actual insurance in the legal sense, but it's a form of insurance that if you are worried about expressing your opinion online or just in the workplace, we have helped over 6,000 people who've lost their jobs, who've been thrown out of university, who've been arrested, people like Lucy and Graham. And we give them legal aid, because otherwise, I was supported by the Free Speech Union because I was almost expelled from university for saying that women don't have penises. And without the Free Speech Union, I don't think I could have finished my degree. So we do also have US membership. So if you're worried, if you're an American citizen and you're worried that what happened to Graham Linehan will happen to you when you land at Heathrow Airport and be arrested immediately on the spot for things you've tweeted, then make sure you buy a membership, because these are all real examples. You're not exaggerating. I'm just thinking of people who don't know how bad the issue is, listening to what you're saying, thinking, God, is this confected right-wing outrage? Every day of my working life so far has been having my mind blown, seeing so many of these cases. we've never been as busy as we are now, and our cases, particularly involving people who are expressing their views about immigration and Islam, have went up by 4 times since Starmer came into power. So it's a real...
And you have to be so careful, even with what I do. Obviously, I run a YouTube channel. I rarely talk about politics. This channel is a new endeavour. But even on my channel, if something is about Britain, I find myself having to bite my tongue. I find myself having to be so careful about what I'm saying. And it is, honestly, it's 1984 come to life. It is the thought police. You should not have to sit, like I do, in my bedroom, making YouTube videos and be thinking, oh, if I say this the wrong way, am I going to have the police knocking at my door? Am I going to have my channel taken down and demonetized? That's not freedom of speech, and I think it's really important that the Americans truly grasp how much we are in danger over here of completely losing that, because if it can happen to us over here in the UK, you know, the basis of Western culture, then it can absolutely happen in the States too. So I think it's really important that the Americans start really taking more of an interest on what's happening over here, because we're raising alarm bells, guys, and like I said, if it can happen to us, it can happen to you. But thank you so much, Connie. I think it's really important that you guys go and check out what Connie is doing. Where can the people find you?
I'm on X. My X handle is _Connie Shaw, and my Instagram handle is Connie Shaw _. And follow the Free Speech Union. We're Speech Union on X, Free Speech Union on Instagram. Follow us on YouTube. All of it. Sign up to our newsletter. Buy your membership. £30 for students a year, annual membership. That's how, you know, it's the best £30 I ever spent. Saved my degree. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Connie. Thank you so much. So I am back home after CPAC. I'm literally just on my laptop now, uploading all of the videos from the event, obviously drinking my coffee. And yeah, I just thought I would do a quick little close-up summary of how I thought the event went. I thought it went amazing. I actually know the organisers, so a big shout out to Joseph Robertson over at Touchpoint UK. It was a great event. I've seen a lot of commentary about it on Twitter. Mixed opinions, but that's fine. You're always going to have that. But as far as I was concerned, it was a great event. It was a great opportunity for me and the new channel to talk to people and to speak to some not only like-minded people, but people that I certainly wouldn't just be able to catch on the street. People with specialised knowledge, and specialised interest in the UK politics and British culture. So I really enjoyed it. I don't go to these kinds of events very often, so if you follow me on Instagram or on X, I'm sure you've seen me posting non-stop about it, because I had a really great time. I'm intrigued to know you guys' thoughts, what you thought about the event, what you thought about the people I spoke to. I know I didn't get a chance to speak to loads of people. I was listening to various talks that they had on in the event, which obviously you guys have seen some clips of. I know that if you want to see all of the talks that were available at CPAC, they are on CPAC Great Britain's YouTube now, so if you are interested in going checking that out, definitely do so. But more, as I kept mentioning in the video, towards my American viewers, I'm interested to hear what you guys think, because like I've said many times throughout this video, I feel like Americans don't truly understand just how bad things are in Great Britain. And at the end of the day, we are in the West and we've got to help each other. And it was great to meet a lot of Americans who were actually at CPAC GB who had a sort of vested interest in our political cultural climate. So I'm intrigued to hear what you guys think. Definitely let me know in the comments. This channel is now up and going. I'm not going to be posting as frequently as I do to my main channel, obviously, because my main channel is still my main channel, but this is a new endeavour of mine. Maybe you can call it a hobby, and I'm really excited to get more videos out to you guys. I'm going to now be vlogging everything I go to, any future events I go to, I will be bringing you guys along with me, and I'm also going to do some more casual vlogs of just when I'm out and about, speaking to people. As you guys know, I'm really extroverted. I speak to absolutely anyone and everyone. So they're not all going to be these big sort of conference type events. Sometimes it might just be me going out for a coffee and bringing you guys along with me and seeing who we meet along the way. So yeah, thanks for joining me on this journey. Thanks for coming to see Christine Grace Grounded. I will see you in the next one. Stay grounded.